Good morning. We're going to do bark again today, and we're going to start with quaking or trembling aspen, which a lot of people confuse when it's younger and smooth like this. They think it's maybe a young birch. It looks a little bit like that, but it's not quite as pure white as birch bark. It doesn't have those big dark markings like birch, and it never peels. It'll always be smooth. When it gets older, and you can see that down here, it'll start to get a rougher bark. Almost looks a little bit like an oak bark when it gets older. But we all know it from this smooth whitish gray bark. Again, but it never peels, so that's one way to tell it from birch. But a lot of people do confuse it anyway. So quaking aspen or trembling aspen. This is Allegheny Serviceberry. It's one of two serviceberries that grow natively in Door County. The other one is called Downy Serviceberry. The bark looks pretty much the same though. It has this smooth, thin gray bark, looks like a beech bark, like a young beech tree at first. But if you look closely, you'll see this darker striping in there. Very attractive bark. Nothing else is quite like that up here. And right here below it is a young ironwood with its, youthful bark. It looks like a young birch tree, and they are related. Birch and ironwood are in the same family. It also looks a little bit like cherry bark, but as you'll see later when we look at some mature ironwoods, the bark character changes a lot as it ages. So we have Allegheny Serviceberry with its smooth, kind of striped gray bark, and then a young ironwood tree right here. So we saw that younger ironwood over by the Allegheny Serviceberry with that smooth, kind of reddish brown, cherry-like bark. Here's an older ironwood, and some of them do this. They kind of peel off top and bottom to get kind of shaggy. I've had people ask me many times if this is a shagbark hickory when they do this. It's not. Shagbark hickory doesn't grow here, well, not native here. And the plates that shag like this are much wider and much longer. So these narrow gray strips on ironwood, which is also called, by the way, American hop hornbeam, another common name for it. But most of them don't do this. Maybe 10% of the ironwoods you see will have this shaggy bark. Most of them are like this, where they don't peel off top and bottom, they just stay attached. But still narrow, the same color, just not shaggy like the other one. So ironwood or American hop hornbeam. This is arborvitae or white cedar, or some people just call it cedar up here, though that's a confusing word to use because so many trees have cedar in their common name. I learned it as arborvitae, which means tree of life. And it has this light gray with brown undertones, narrow strips that almost shred in places, looks fibrous. And as you look further down here, you'll see that the pileated woodpeckers have been, well, it's been a while, but they worked this tree at one point. They do love arborvitae, and sometimes the holes will be 3-4 times this size. This one's callousing over already. You can see the reddish underbark on the callus. But this is a pileated woodpecker hole, and obviously it found something to eat in there. They love carpenter ants, which are often in older trees, and there is, as you can see here, some decay in this tree. So there probably were carpenter ants in there at one point. But this is kind of classic arborvitae or white cedar bark, that shreddy, fibrous bark with those great pileated woodpecker holes. We're just going to do 4 tree barks today because the fifth thing I want to show you is this really unusual plant that my daughter found the other day. She's here working on autumn olive removal and came across this. This is Coralroot. We're pretty sure it's striped Coralroot. It's hard to say for sure, but this is unusual. The coral roots are saprophytes. They're saprophytic plants. They feed on decaying organic matter in the soil, unlike a parasitic plant like mistletoe, which actually feeds on living tissue. So it's a saprophyte, and it's here feeding, I suspect, on decaying branches and roots. But a real treat to see this. I've only seen it a few times in my life. Coralroot, we think it's striped Coralroot, and it doesn't have any green tissue. It gets all of its nutrition from the decaying organic matter in the soil, so it doesn't have to produce its own carbohydrates, so it doesn't have to have chlorophyll.